There was a lot of condemnation that happened to me as a young person, and I find in my life that authorities oppress me as a form of punishment pertaining to crimes that have to be arraigned and laws that have to be enforced on the behalf of the judgment of entities of World War II and World War I and the Civil War, United States Civil War. And so these entities, they believe that enforcing crimes of making annoying phone calls, of calling people up, and of not having proper phone etiquette can be warranted, and that they can start a war. And so I made a comment to a person the other day at a Starbucks that I was distressing about having to be orientated and raised around a species of mankind that in high school I learned was basically only bragging about doing crime, including crimes of injuring others and crimes of anti-Semitism related wrongdoings. And so I learned about approximately 14 million homicide cases pertaining to the information that high school had taught me in Santa Cruz County. And Santa Cruz County decided that it's so important to enforce the law of making annoying phone calls that it then comes after me on the street and specifically displaces me with mind-altering torture devices and with espionage by electronic devices for the purposes of stalking regarding procuring crime. So that means that the government uses electronics to follow me around to try to make me go crazy because of a genocide that they accessorized less than 100 years ago. And then judges of that genocide sentenced people to hundreds of years in jail. For example, the case of a longest sentencing of Scott Robinson. If you do the internet hit, Scott Robinson was a culprit who was sentenced to over 100 years, but the Mercedes-Benz, Jeep, and Volkswagen companies were not sentenced to any sort of punishment regarding an arraignment after about approximately 14 million homicide cases clinically, according to Harbor High School and Ron Indra of Harbor High School when I attended in approximately the year 1996. And so the government believes that I'm a thief and that I'm a burglar and that I was breaking into homes and that it wasn't because I was mind altered, including missing my own blood. The United States specifically injured me for the purposes of inserting mind altering torture devices, but specifically this was premeditated, more than likely, so I was given scaphocephaly just to have a weak skull regarding the United States Armed Forces, which are now called services or whatever they get changed to after that, but they were originally called the United States Armed Forces, but the British monarchy changes words simply to kidnap people. So here in the United States we live in a Dutch-British monarchy, and these people come around with the CIA and send sheriffs and say that you're making annoying phone calls, that you're giving too much information, and then it tells people that the high school lesson of saying if you say to murder the United States president you may be given the death penalty isn't too much information. So that's the little sarcastic part about the United States practicing psychiatry. But specifically, not only that, the thing is that, you know, I was injured by laws of corporal punishment to a child that the United States and the state of California subverted simply to follow me around in the future regarding laws of burglary and larceny, laws of common sense regarding work ethic, and etc. And so I have to really urge people when I speak to them to, if you do tourism, maybe the United States, unless you're a part, or if you're for Nazism, the United States is probably more for you, especially if you're for World War I or the Russian Cold War, or if you're for the United States Civil War. Here in the United States, we've had the ability to adapt with kindness to any sort of war, and that's why I have the ability to record these messages. But at the same time, if you're not for World Warfare, even secretly, maybe the United States isn't a good place for tourism, just so they don't get that extra money, so that these people don't get extra money to practice cannibalism with the FBI, because the United States doesn't have laws about cannibalism for the most part. But regarding British monarchy and regarding genocide, the United States will immediately probably make a new law, or it'll change a website or do things like that. So that's why I wouldn't recommend the United States for tourism if you come from a country that's a little bit more kinder and not secretly malicious. So if you're, you know, a person that pretends to be nice and stuff like that, sure, it's a great place. You know, there's still a lot of great people. But if you're really somebody who's just trying to have a good time, you don't want to get messed with, you really want to make the right choices in your life, you know, make sure that you consider this information, because it might lead to saving your life in the future. And that's my only intent.